All right, welcome to the Week 8 Forum. This week we are looking in comparative perspective at presidents and prime ministers. How do these different executives function? What are the pros and cons of having a presidential system? That is to say, having an executive that is elected separate of the legislature versus having a president that is basically a part of parliament. Uh, the principal virtue that typically Americans would point to is that it feeds in this idea of balance, right? The idea of the separation of powers and checks and balances. As Richard Neustadt says, that the separation of powers is kind of a misnomer. What we actually have are separate institutions that are sharing powers. The fact that compels within our constitutional system consensual governance, which is to say, generally speaking, it's really hard to get government to do something that only a minority people, and only a minority of people really want done. That's one of the things when you look at the wall that Donald Trump is hoping to build. It's really not that popular a proposition even within the Republican Party. There are very few Republicans along the border that really want to have some huge, imposing 30-foot wall built. So that's the advantage of that kind of, of having a separate president. At the same time, Donald Trump kind of illustrates some of the negatives of the presidential system. If you can win one party's nomination, you've got a 50-50 shot or something like a 50-50 shot at becoming president. And that raises real questions about whether or not, somebody lacking actual governing experience, whether that puts them in a position where they can really expose the rest of the system through their incompetence to some real problems. Um, what about what about a parliamentary system? What are the advantages of having a government where literally the executive is formally kind of part of parliament? Theresa May, who's the current prime minister, is also a member of parliament. The virtue there is that you get more consistency in governance, right? Generally speaking, the majority party in a parliamentary system is able to work their will. That improves governing accountability, right? I mean, there are no surprises there, right? The government is doing what the majority party wants, and that is putting voters in a position of saying, I either agree or I don't agree with government policies, and that is a real kind of advantage, right? At the same time, Theresa May also illustrates some of the disadvantages of a parliamentary system. In this instance, you've got a prime minister in a position of power that is able to control her party, but they can't control the government. And largely speaking, that is because there's an issue that is dogging, the English government that the government doesn't seem to be able to resolve, and that is the broader issue of Brexit, of whether the UK should withdraw from the European Union, and that's something that they did a referendum on it. Uh, Theresa May inherited that problem. That was done under a different administration, and she can't come up with an exit strategy that doesn't, that people can live with, right? So there's a very real, likelihood that at some point in the near future you're going to end up with a hung parliament or a vote of no confidence passed on Theresa May that will compel new elections, and that's likely going to negatively affect, the British government, and certainly the Conservative Party, the Tories. So both systems can work. Both systems can become really dysfunctional. And that's, to me, that's the interesting thing about trying to compare these two systems of government. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that we can talk about over the course of this week. And I hope that you'll read this, read the material, and we can have a valuable discussion. All right, so let's go forward and do a good job